And welcome everyone to today's session. My name is Laina Greene, and I'm the CEO of Angels of Impact, which is a social venture that funds and supports women of color, creating sustainable businesses to end poverty. Today's session on Restorative Capital Innovators, Investing in Inclusive Economies, is curated, as Tulasi mentioned, under the ASBN Restorative Investing Task Force, which is a group that has been working over the last 2 years, conducting webinars and smaller group learning sessions on overcoming systemic racism through restorative capital. The task force was led by myself, Babby Jacobs, Cindy Willett from Knight Foundation, and it sought to promote a better understanding that deploying capital to BIPOC capital innovators to close the racial wealth gap is not enough, that there also needs to be an understanding of the whole life cycle of money and how it can perpetuate harm. To fix the racial wealth gap problem, we need to understand that the finance system is not broken, but was designed to accumulate wealth for the few at the expense of BIPOC communities. How we flow money, the terms, the success metrics, etc., can perpetuate the trauma if not done intentionally to overcome it. The task force was inspired by the work of Namaka Akbo's vision of restorative economics and builds upon the works and ideas generated by Rodney Foxworth from Common Future and Alpha Damalmalish contributions. Derek Peebles from ASBN, Erika Williams from RSF, and Najaah Daniels of IC have since joined forces with the task force. And since many of the ICC members had been active members of the task force meetings, we invited ICC to partner with us at the task force meeting in San Diego, and I'm sure many of you were there. After a successful meeting, ASBN formed a formal partnership with the Inclusive Capital Collective to take the work of Restorative Investing Task Force to the next level. Najaah will talk to you a little bit more about ICC, and today's webinar is to share the work of ASBN's inclusive economy work, ICC's work on trauma-informed finance, and RSF's social finance work on racial justice collaboration. We hope to show you how all of this ties together, share ideas of what can be developed, but more importantly, we're looking to move more capital into restorative investing. Derek Peebles will be opening our session today, and he's the director of the Inclusive Economies at ASBN. So Derek, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lana, and welcome everyone. Appreciate you all giving up your hour to hear us speak on restorative investing. As Lana said, my name is Derek Peebles, and I'm the Senior Director of Policy and Advocacy for Inclusive Economy at ASBN. And I'll just take a couple of minutes to just kind of discuss the body of work and what that portfolio looks like and kind of where we're aiming forward and how I think restorative investing really applies to our work in inclusive economy. And so this portfolio of work was designed as an importance of building an inclusive economy that really serves the needs of small and local businesses, but along with place-based entrepreneurs, as well as the unique challenges that community leaders are facing as well. And so our role in the inclusive economy work is building peer networks and strengthening place-based financing. And then, of course, advocating for restorative investments are just a few of the ways that we work with, that ASBN works with communities under inclusive economy. And this work is also at the intersection of climate and economic justice. And so we've had great support over the past year, and especially through the merger and supporting the growth and development of small businesses and entrepreneurs. But we're really looking to ramp up our work and serving especially those in underserved communities. And so really looking at areas of access to capital, looking at, restorative investing, but also just looking at overall how we can create local thriving local economies that keep the flow of the dollar circulating in communities as a way towards sustainability. And so our work also has different task forces and working groups. And these working groups really provide members with the ongoing opportunity to shape and engage our work, especially as it pertains to policy, but also as it pertains to capital deployment and our work supporting small business ecosystems. And so just to give you all a sample of kind of the working groups we currently have, of course, we're here today to discuss restorative investing. And so as Laina stated, and how I've been kind of explaining not only to other membership networks, but funders and capital innovators, is that this group is really committed to addressing the systemic issues in our financial system and in our economy, especially as it pertains to the success opportunities for BIPOC entrepreneurs. And so as part of the approach is really building bridges between traditional philanthropy and market-driven impact investing practices, but also addressing the equity issues. Laina can articulate that better than I can, but that's a lot of the organizations that have been really interested in the restorative investing are people doing this work that are really looking to organize and build coalitions, because ASBN really has the platform to engage in policy. And so we're ultimately also creating frameworks and policy frameworks that we can educate our lawmakers and elected officials on the state level and on the federal level. But we do have other working groups within the inclusive economy portfolio that includes, for instance, transforming business ownership. This group is really committed to helping businesses transition into worker-owned and employee-owned companies, which will save jobs and keep wealth within our communities. This initiative also has the potential of diminishing barriers for racial equity, as well as enable individuals from all walks of life an opportunity at an ownership legacy. And so that group has really been engaged in policy as well. And then recently we have our faith-based community investing group, which is a group of CDFIs and different endowment leaders that are working in the faith-based space to look at how to their role and the faith-based role into helping unlock access to capital for BIPOC communities and entrepreneurs. And so I'll stop there. That's a lot, but we're hoping that we do a series of these convenings throughout the remainder of the year and really invite you all to come in and be involved and, again, help us shape this work as we begin to start organizing capital to deploy. Thank you. I'll turn it back to you, Laina.
Thank you so much, Derek. I just wanted to see if maybe you could also introduce the partnership between ASBN and ICC and frame that before we bring Najaah on.
Sure. So yes, I'm very happy about the relationship with the Inclusive Capital Collective. I had the pleasure of meeting Najaah Daniels in San Diego at our annual conference, and we co-led a session together on restorative investing. And I can just say that I was really floored by what she had to present and really looking into this space of trauma-informed finance, which is a topic that I haven't been very knowledgeable about, but I understood very quickly how it really applies to really building this community of trust as we begin to organize and build and support capital innovators. And I see Najaah as very critical to that space. And also, she's just great to hear. So at San Diego, after our session, David Levine, our president, and I met with Laina and Najaah. And we basically just talked about how we could best support each other. And one thing led to another, and that's how the partnership was formed. I will say that I also think this relationship, the best thing that I can see the ASBN platform has to offer is access to relationships, to people like Najaah who are really out here working to uplift BIPOC communities and BIPOC entrepreneurs. And so the best thing that we can do with our huge platform is open up our access to relationships and our policy platform to be able to further support her work. So it just made sense that we partnered together, and that's kind of how that was formed. And this is kind of our first convening since that discussion. So very happy about it. And thank you, Najaah. Appreciate it.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction, Laina and Derek. Erika, wonderful to see you as well. ASBN, thank you for the invitation. If I'm not mistaken, this is your 150th webinar. So very honored to be a part of this historic webinar series. My name is Najaah Daniels, also known as Priestess Ifaliri Oshuniki Osawamimo of the Indigenous Faith of Africa. And I proudly serve as the founding CEO of the Inclusive Capital Collective. While I have you all here with me today, something that I do with my members all the time and in any space I'm in, I like to regulate together. And what that means is pretty much settle our nervous systems by using somatics or breath work, whether we're in person or virtually, because the work that we are doing is not only important, but it definitely takes a toll on our mental, physical, and spiritual health. So if you would join me in a quick breathing exercise, I want us to do 2 breaths. The first breath, we're going to breathe in learning together, and we're going to breathe out unlearning, because a lot of the things that we're doing together may be new to us, regardless of what your background is or your age may be. But it's important that we come in with enough emotional capital to be able to hold ourselves and each other up. So on the count of 3, I'm going to ask that together we breathe in learning. 1, 2, 3. Hold. And breathe out unlearning. For the second one, we're going to breathe in abundance, and we're going to breathe out scarcity. So on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, abundance. And we're going to hold a little longer this time. I want you to feel the abundance that's within you. And now release scarcity. So when you're willing and able, please join me back in the center so we can begin our conversation about the Inclusive Capital Collective. Thank you for that, y'all. So as I share my screen, I hope you can see it. If not, please let us know in the chat. But I'm going to share a couple of quick slides. Apology in advance if it goes pretty fast. I'm originally from the Bronx, New York, and I tend to talk quite quickly. So the Inclusive Capital Collective, we are the Trauma-Informed Racial Equity Finance Cooperative. What does that mean? So the purpose of the Inclusive Capital Collective is to overcome systemic racism through equitable access to capital. And here's some of our history. So back in 2019, pre-pandemic, if you remember those times, there was a group of us that came together for a co-design meeting. And some of those folks were mentioned earlier during our introductions. And we came together to talk about the access issues that BIPOC entrepreneurs, fund managers, and those who operate in real estate and other investment funds are having. So we decided, why not create a network of individuals where we have liked, lived, labored, and learned experiences, and also shared resources across the country to really move forward possible ways on how we can deploy capital to BIPOC communities and create generational wealth. Fast forward about 3 or 4 months later, the entire country shut down. And we had to then realize how to not only keep those relationships, but how to do it in a virtual way, not knowing that we would be unable to see each other until 2.5 years later. The ICC is currently incubated under International Cooperative Zebras Unite, or Zebras for us American folks. And I proudly serve as the lead of the Inclusive Capital Collective, and we will be spinning out as an entity by the end of this year. The ICC's initiatives and programs are staffed by its members and are paid in as well as patronage capacities. We believe that everyone's work should be paid, especially our thought partnership work, and we make sure that we have equitable ways of doing so. Here's some of our principles. Capital innovators are entrepreneurs and practitioners creating local alternative capital mechanisms that disrupt the current financial systems and generate generational wealth within Black and Brown communities and with Black and Brown communities. We are creating solutions for and by underestimated and underserved communities and shifting the narrative of what it means to have ownership and governance over our intellectual property, over our communities, and the capital that we have access to. It's also essentially important to say, or especially important to say, that Black and Brown entrepreneurs and innovators are not risky. We are willing to take more risk. And we are able to do so because we have additional forms of capital, like emotional capital, relational capital, as well as social capital, to ensure that we have the support we need while we're advancing our financial capital together. Our efforts share a theme of reimagining, recreating, and rebuilding within each industry that we serve in. So for example, our Black Paper series, which is on our website, and I will put that in the chat in a second, shows various ways that we can increase capital and generational wealth in real estate, manufacturing, as well as character-based or trust-based lending. We understand that the financial system is broken, as well as the way we invest or don't. It truly increases the racism, harms, and injustices that we face. So investors, whether private, institutional, or commercial, we understand have blind spots and inherent biases that favor incumbents over innovators. At the Inclusive Capital Collective, that is not the case. So here's our roadmap so you can have a better understanding of where we've been. So back in phase one, as I mentioned, in October 2019 through February 2020, we were truly in our research and concept phase. I actually ended up joining the ICC a little bit later in January 2021 during our prototype and building capacity. At that time, I came on as a consultant, really bringing in trauma-informed practices as well as movement-based organizing structures to the work of finance, but quickly understanding that there needed to be more capacity and more intent behind this work, and decided to join full-time. As you can see now, as we're in 2023, we are truly scaling as we have 3 capital products that we are working on in order to deploy capital to our members and their communities. So here's our priorities. First and foremost, change the narrative. As I mentioned, our Black papers based on our trauma-informed finance framework also speaks on leveraging government programs as well as additional thought leadership on how we do our trauma-informed finance work. We work with partners like ASBN, for example, on regulatory and policy initiatives, and look forward to doing more as we enter the 2024 election season. We also are here to scale ICC capital products and advisory services, which I'll speak a little bit more about later, but it's important that we do so to expand the ICC regranting facility. We're looking to deploy the first raise of capital for our ICC credit enhancement facility for our members who are used to investors who are risk adverse, to not have them be as risk adverse. And then, of course, to create the ICC community development entity, which we're looking to do as part of the U.S. Treasury Department certification, and enhance the ICC's ability to leverage government programs, as well as things like new market tax credits. I want to take a moment to spotlight our investment committee members, and you may see some familiar faces here. But it's essential that we take a moment to see not only these beautiful faces on the screen, but to see the difference of what the ICC is doing compared to what we do traditionally. I'm going to uplift my wonderful friend, Will Stringer, who always laughs when I do this in a meeting or an event. Will Stringer is our minority in this group, and he is proudly so. With that being said, he is also a trusted co-conspirator in understanding that fighting systemic racism is not on the backs or should not be on the backs of Black and Brown people, but on all of us. The investment committee here has been able to deploy over $500,000 to ICC members using our regranting facility. Our regranting facility is accessible to ICC members for unrestricted funding. And what does that mean? Literally no strings attached. So as long as you're able to fill out a very simple form that shows that your leadership is BIPOC led and owned, that you are able to show the work you're doing is going to support overcoming systemic racism, and why you need this capital, we're able to deploy funding to our members without a hassle. The average grant size is about $50,000, but we've also been receiving a lot more of ask at higher rates. Our goal for this year is to raise $5 million through various partnerships and sponsorships, as well as grants that we've applied for and are in the process of receiving. Again, this funding is strictly for our members and is not going to overhead to the ICC. In order to shift capital, you must shift capital. Our ICC credit enhancement facility is that friendly hard cash that we talk about in order to make sure that our members have what they need on their balance sheets in order for folks to invest and say yes. It's also a single blended financial facility, which allows us to really identify who is in need and how they need the funding. So we've been working closely with our real estate working group in order to truly identify what are the best credit enhancements for certain groups in various regions across the country. And then last but not least, our new market tax credit practice or pipeline. We have identified that there is a huge gap in this practice where there are literally 300 to 400 people who have specialized in this work, and less than 1% actually identify as BIPOC. So it's truly important that when we speak about thought leadership and actually having opportunity to shift some of these practices and legislations, that we actually are in the room to have these conversations and shift these practices. Our advisory services have currently been working with groups like the Kresge Foundation and the Port of Portland, as we are using a race-conscious reparative pricing approach to ensure that we are accounting for the emotional labor as well as additional costs that BIPOC entrepreneurs and fund managers have to deal with when speaking on things like trauma-informed finance or systemic racism. Again, there's additional work that's being done not only with the ICC, but in partnership with organizations like these to really embed these practices into the culture, community, and capital practices that they're leading. And our goal revenue currently is $500,000, but we are working on increasing this as we have been receiving a lot more interest in our advisory services. If you have any questions or are interested in joining the Inclusive Capital Collective, you can definitely send me an email at that email address below. I will also share the website in the chat. But again, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and share with you all about the Inclusive Capital Collective. And I look forward to the next time we're together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Najaah. Always blow us away whenever you present. So I would like to then introduce Erika next. because Erika, Najaah, Derek and I were in San Diego, and there was a lot of magic being created with all these ideas going back and forth. And so she's the other piece of the equation that came into this conversation with the work she's currently doing. So Erika, I would love to have you present what you're working on and some of the ideas that, you know, we've been trying to cook together.
Sure. Thank you so much. And Najaah, wonderful, wonderful presentation. And this is definitely why, after meeting you and Derek as well at the ASBN conference in San Diego, I just definitely had to put all of my efforts and expertise in support of you and the work that you're doing. So at RSF, let me just introduce myself. I'm Erika Williams. I'm Client Development Vice President of RSF. And our mission is to circulate capital. And what we bring to the table here with this partnership is just a deep bench of expertise in moving capital, in the ideas of integrated capital using impact investment, philanthropic capital, just to make sure that communities have what they need to be more self-sustainable, or whether you're talking about on a local level, across the globe. So we are sponsors of donor advised funds. We have a revolving loan fund with the Social Investment Fund, and we have 5 thematic collaboratives. And the thematic collaboratives cover racial justice, it's arts and education, biodynamic farming, food and agriculture, and women's capital collaborative. So upon meeting everyone here on this call here at the conference, it was just more like, how can we support each other and the work in the racial justice movement? And as I said before, RSF, we can offer a deep bench of expertise. We've been doing this for 40 years. Our 40th anniversary is next year, 2024. And we just wanted to make sure that we are not, that we are part of the solution, that we're not just talking about what change means and what can happen, but what happens when we all come together to circulate capital for all people on this planet and not just some. So we have the Racial Justice Collaborative that I am definitely recommitting myself to, and in support of the work that we're doing here today. And the Racial Justice Collaborative will serve as a funding mechanism, a funding vehicle, so that when we raise capital, when we have a very audacious goal of $1 billion with a B, that definitely highlights the need for this type of capital to be unlocked, so that we can be just more self-supportive, self-actualized in the goals that we have for ourselves. So with the Racial Justice Collaborative, we're able to fundraise, and then using the platform of ASBN with the direction of Derek, being able to look at it on a policy level, being able to tap into the relationships established with RSF, just in the deep impact space, impact investment space, and being able to tap into the donor, the philanthropic space as well. So bringing all of those full circle in service to the members of the BIPOC community, I can't think of a better partnership to have. I can't think of a better way to spend my time and talent on a regular basis, on an everyday basis. So I don't have a whole presentation for you on that, but just know that RSF is definitely standing with you all and committed to this cause.
Thank you, Erika. I think you're being very humble about what you're doing, because I think the other equation that I wanted to bring to the picture is we've had conversations, Najaah, Erika, myself also, about the funding vehicle for these amazing goals that you have as well, Najaah. And so maybe one of the things that I'd like you to also talk about, because you come from the traditional finance background, you've seen firsthand what's broke about it, and therefore you're passionate about fixing this, right? So maybe if I could have you and Najaah maybe share a little bit about this audacious goal of $1 billion, because this is exactly part of what you talked about, Najaah, about changing the narrative, right? And so I'd just like to throw and see if you both have anything to add. And of course, Derek, from this perspective of how important it is to change the narrative and how important it is to actually move resources at this point. So Erika, do you want to go first? And then I'll have Najaah.
Sure, I can definitely kick us off with that conversation. So as Laina mentioned, I definitely come from the world of high finance with the bigger banks. But that's just because they're bigger banks doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing it correctly. So a lot of the time that I spent early on in my career was as a financial advisor, a wealth advisor, where we're sharing concepts, giving advice on how to hold on to your money, how to not pay so much in taxes, and how to keep the money going on into perpetuity. And when I joined RSF and got on this learning journey with the Restorative Task Force, I remember you all were one of the first people that I met as an employee of RSF, and just changing my understanding and my idea of what an investor is and what an investor should be looking at when they're building out their portfolio. You know, when we're talking about how much harm we're doing by just investing in some of the innocuous sounding mutual funds or stocks and bonds, so just rounding out your portfolio with just say $1 million into very extractive practices, and then setting aside 20% of that to make us feel better about the harm we've created. And so instead of trying to give advice and steer people in that direction, I wanted to use my time and talent to be more educational in my focus, and making sure people understand that you can direct your money to creating being a part of the solution rather than continuing to create harm, and then looking to put a solve on top of that to say, well, at least I gave, I gave a certain amount of money to counteract the harm that I've done. So I just am so overwhelmed by the work that everyone here is doing in this impact investing space, in this integrated capital space. But I just understand that if we can join forces together for good, our resources, our time, our talent, our expertise can just go so much further. So I cannot go into more detail about that because I'm just so passionate about it. And I just want to turn it over to Derek because the partnership with ASBN to give us more reach is just giving us more firepower to work with.
Yes, thanks, Erika. One of the things that really resonated with me and our conversations out in San Diego was the concept of trauma-informed finance. And when I think about that, and when I read more about it, and I would encourage everyone to go through the ICC Black Paper, because when I think about it, it also makes me think about the narrative building that we have to do around this concept that we're all people that contribute to society and economy in very different ways. Makes me think that we should be looking at different types of data that would show the assets that people have and would be able to show how we can invest in them. And so those are kind of the things that are on my mind. But back to kind of what you alluded to, Erika, I think that, now as we're starting to hear backlash against diversity and inclusion, as we're starting to hear backlash against ESG, this is all going to trickle down into all of the efforts that's being done around racial equity investing, right? Because this is a big piece of the conversation around access to capital, making sure that we're deploying capital into areas that could really have the most impact. But also thinking about how we can leverage this work to bring in more people from exile of our current economy. And then how do we think about those type of people and looking at the narratives that, and this is something that always, because I come from the economic development world. And so, and there's a good friend of mine on the call, Della Rucker, who we've had several conversations around how economic development plays a role into this. And so when we're thinking about community development, we're thinking about creating a quality of life in communities. And when we're thinking about economic development, we're thinking about two things, and that's creating wealth and that's creating jobs. But those two communities really don't talk. And then when you look at the world of investment professionals, they're so far away from that conversation. But the analogy that I always like to use is that, you know, you take a community of 5,000 residents that are making an average annual income of $20,000 a year. Data would suggest that that community is poor and not a place to invest in. And so our narratives around that community really drives disinvestment. But switching the narrative, taking that same 5,000 families that make a $20,000 annual household income, that's $100 million a year in annual spending power. And how are we leveraging this work to keep the flow of those dollars circulating and making sure that, you know, local business communities can really support themselves? So I say all of that very long-winded to say that these are all of the issues that we're working on under the inclusive economy work through ASBN. And where we have the power is in numbers, is through our membership. And so it's really imperative that we find ways that we can support each other by bringing the assets, all of our assets to the table, instead of the usual way we convene, which is bringing people to the table to solve a problem and focus on what's deficient. And so when I think about restorative investing and the opportunity for the community that we can create, is how more powerful can we be in this work when we're coming together and bringing our assets to the table, and then we're figuring out how to mobilize those assets. And in this case, deploying capital. And so that's where, and that's how I treat this partnership, is based on assets, not based on all the problems that we're trying to solve, knowing that those are important too, but we're really trying to make an impact.
Thank you, Derek. Najaah, I think you see some of the questions if you want to address that. Yeah.
Yes, I am so excited. So in regards to trauma-informed finance, which is the framework the ICC is actively putting together, I want y'all to visually think about this with me. So if we have trauma-informed finance in the middle, and then we have connected to it allied partnerships, which is what Erika has been discussing, as well as Derek, then we have under that, we have education and interventions. So as we've been speaking about the Black papers, the capital products, the different ways we're coming into the financial ecosystem and showing and proving that these new innovations are not new. They may be new to you, but they're not new to our communities, and they actually work, including cooperative governance, which the ICC is a cooperative. So we have allied partnerships, education and innovations. And then on this side of the web, we have multi-stakeholder cooperation, because we understand that it's going to take everyone to participate. It's not just on us capital innovators. It's not just on fund managers. It's not just on big banks and philanthropy. It literally requires us to get out of our siloed approaches and come together as a web. So when we're speaking about trauma-informed finance, first and foremost, we're acknowledging the historic harms that are happening. How often do we step in a room and the elephant is there and none of us address it? So let me bring up one of these elephants. I had the honor of working with over 250 BIPOC practitioners. Some of them have been doing this work as long as I've been alive. With that being said, for the past 20, 30 years, they constantly have to go into a room of investors, more than likely do not share their lived, labored, or learned experience, and have to advocate, show, and prove and validate their value. How often are you asked to prove the value of not only yourself, your business prop, but also your community at large. So trauma-informed finance is acknowledging that these practices are still in place, as well as various standards, metrics, and other things that are required to show success. When we're doing impact work, let's take a step back. What we're truly doing, everyone, is impact work. It happens to be in finance. We're not used to bringing our humanity into finance, unfortunately, but we see how well it has done our country as well as our world. So trauma-informed finance also brings in not only providing a safe space for everyone to participate, again, acknowledging lived experience, labored experience, as well as learned experience, but shifting power within that container that we're creating together. And how do we shift power? By leveling the playing field. So the ICC acknowledges 5 forms of capital: intellectual, emotional, as well as financial, of course, spiritual, and social. In the financial system, yet again, or the traditional financial system, we are so used to focusing on financial capital. If that's the case, how have Black and Brown communities, entrepreneurs, and businesses been able to be sustainable throughout these years if we do not have access to this capital? We must diversify and understand the various levels of capital that are needed in order to accomplish anything. So we provided a safe space, we shifted power, we're leveling the playing field. So what's next, y'all? We have to have a structural revolution to address systemic issues. And at the core of this issue, we know is racism. And if there are folks out there who are still unaware or who still need additional support, whether it's resources, readings, videos, please truly reach out to me, regardless of what you identify as ethnically, because it's important that we all have the same understanding about what's happening and we share education amongst each other and peer learning. So I'll stop there if there's any additional questions. I'm very passionate about this and can talk about this all day.
Absolutely, absolutely. I just wanted to zoom in on a couple of points that you talk about, Najaah, that I feel maybe could be able highlighted. You talked about it's going to take multi-stakeholder. There's the fund managers, there's the community. And I think Derek used the word place-based entrepreneurs. You used the word local capital. It's going to take all of us working together, which is part of the reason why this partnership is very exciting, right? RSF has a piece of the equation. You have a piece of the equation. Now, one of the things another elephant in the room that I wanted to address is that constant unconscious bias of looking at BIPOC communities as beneficiaries and not fund managers, right? So even when we talk about funding entrepreneurs, we know the level of unconscious bias is a lot, but having fund managers makes it even a double layer there. So I just kind of wanted to address that elephant in the room as well, and also addressing Rose's issue in the that she raised in there, where she was talking about she appreciated the response from Derek, but she just wanted to make sure that as capital is directed to BIPOC entrepreneurs, that we need to ensure these businesses are not unduly extracting labor from their workers, etc. But then the question that I would ask is, isn't that part of the reason why we want to focus on BIPOC intermediaries, BIPOC fund managers? Because there's a certain element of a lived experience that means, like you said, these solutions are not necessarily new to the BIPOC communities, right? We've been using it. So I wondered if you could just flesh that out a little bit. Because that's another elephant in the room, is the unconscious bias on whether we can manage money.
Is this question for me, Laina?
It's for any of you if you wanted to. I thought you would probably be the most passionate, but I would love to hear from Derek and Erika as well.
I would love to hear Najaah's response to that, quite honestly.
Yeah, so first and foremost, let's break it down and go back to the basics. I'm very big on fundamentals, right? So when we're speaking about living experience, and we have to first identify who are we speaking of. So again, these are the folks that are impacted on the daily basis by our financial system. I also want to heavily identify these are also everyday folks who have been purposely not included into the financial system and may be quote unquote illiterate when it comes to how to actually find finances, how to actually participate, very similar to politics. So I don't recall if I mentioned this in the beginning. I worked in politics for 15 years before I started this work in finance, and see a lot of similarities in how if you don't have access or connections, you are easily shut out of the process. So those are lived experience folks. I want to talk about labored experience folks. What I would say is probably most of us, if not all of us on the call, we're the change makers that are actually doing this work day in and day out. We also may share lived experiences. I know I do as a Black Latina who grew up in foster care. I also have lived experiences that's related to my labored experience in work. And then the third piece of that is the learner. Now, this is when we flip the pyramid on its head, y'all. The learners are the big businesses, are philanthropy, big banks, are the folks that truly do not understand because of privilege, because of access, because the systems are in place for them to actually thrive, have no idea what the everyday folks who are not a part of the 1% are going through. This is when we flip the pyramid and actually show that the living and labored experience folks are the ones that should be shifting capital, shifting the narrative, shifting power, and the folks who actually have the access and power should be learning from these folks. And it's very uncomfortable at first because, again, when we're shifting this, I'm only talking about experiences. But as we bucket folks into experiences, we start to notice the differences in gender, in class, in race. So again, I didn't bring up race, gender, class, anything just now, y'all. I just talked about different lived experiences. But through that, we're able to identify the biases and the harms in the systems and how they're structured in the US.
Yep. There's so many layers to it. I think that's Erika, what has been your experience since you've been working in the finance field? I know Derek has also worked in finance, so if you want to address that elephant in the room.
No, I mean, just the fact that we can have this, this opportunity to talk about and address the elephants in the room is powerful in and of itself, full stop. To be able to be in the room where we're discussing the different power dynamics, giving the recipes for, the steps for what we need to do, how we need to act, how we need to come together is all important. And I'm just very, very grateful to have a whole community of folks who share that and we can rely on each other, that we can learn from each other. Again, when I mentioned me being on this journey to unlearn a lot of the things that I have learned, but to also bring that practical experience to the table is just so important. But just to have space for the emotions, for the trauma that we've all lived through is just important to bring to this work, because we don't just do it just for a financial return on a sheet of paper. We're trying to change lives. We're trying to share with people the tools that they need to create a better life for themselves and to the next generation. So I'm just here for all of bringing our full selves to the conversation. I love how Najaah put it with just all of the different layers, the complexity. We want to own that. We want to share that. We want to acknowledge that in the decisions that we make and how we move money.
Derek, anything to add?
I really don't have much to add to that. I think I go back to how we started this conversation, and that was, breathing in abundance and breathing out scarcity. And I think, this is what we've been able to unpack. And I think we have the opportunity to create a community that continues to unpack that, but also works towards building a new narrative that's based around opportunity. And I would love to just have a future conversation just on how the way we collect data puts us in the mindset of scarcity. I think, that has a role to play into how we create metrics, because that's another dominant type of indicator. It's like, well, how are you measuring success? And I think there's some healthy tension in that conversation. But I'm also a part of a racial equity investing coalition of asset managers, impact investors that are really looking at what is the standard metric system that could be created that's, I don't know how to say it, but that's tracking abundance, not tracking scarcity. Probably doesn't make sense, but I could probably articulate that
absolutely.
later.
I mean, still an important component that needs to be looked at. So I understand. So just for the audience to know, Erika and Derek are willing to stay on for an extra 15 minutes, but Najaah did stop in 10 minutes. So Najaah, I'm going to focus on you first. And there are still a couple of detailed questions that maybe you could just tip. Where could they get information on trauma-informed finance? And Mary wants to know, what is trauma-informed advisory services look like?
Yeah, thanks everyone. So as I mentioned during the presentation, the Inclusive Capital Collective is still incubated under a larger cooperative that's international called Zebras Unite. So when we spin out by the end of this year, early next year, that's when we will actually be fully, launching our trauma-informed finance work under our own new entity. So again, we're currently a program under a larger entity. So we're sharing this with the public. It's very much a thing, but we won't be launching it officially until our launch as an entity. So please go to our website and sign up to learn more and read our Black papers, which are also under our trauma-informed finance framework. The second question was in regards to
the trauma advisory services.
Advisory services, yes. So thank you for that question. To be completely honest, it happened organically as folks have been very pleased by the work of the Black papers. So we've written 3 Black papers on real estate, manufacturing, as well as character-based or trust-based lending. And it really has done well, not only in the financial ecosystems, but in ecosystems that intersect with ours, as folks truly have been looking for innovations that are led by Black and Brown thought leaders. And that's exactly what we're able to provide. So for example, McKinsey is always being called to do some research, as Derek was talking about. Now ICC is getting those calls. And why that is because we're using a different lens and framework. So as someone who has done DEI work for a very long time, I can also say DEI is very much diluted. And I'm here to replace DEI with trauma-informed finance so we can actually have equitable steps to move forward, not only in practice, but within how we practice our work and our products. So it's essential that we are able to truly lean in. And as we talked about before, it's not just the thought leadership in regards to intellect. It's the emotional piece of it. It's also the lived experience of it. Folks are really open to have courage now. So there's this readiness checklist. The name of the entity is skipping me, but pretty much it's various questions on what you should do in order to prepare for readiness. ICC is taking the same approach, but in regards to courage. What is the courage that entities are willing and able to take in order to take risk, which is truly not risk, but since we're going to deem it that way, how are you going to take risk or invest in Black and Brown brilliance? And these are some of the ways we're able to do so. Again, that is not charity. It also completely shifts the power dynamic. So we're not asking Wells Fargo, Kresge Foundation, Port of Portland, hey, can you grant us a technical assistant and grant support? That's nice, but we're actually showing up as a partner and being paid for our intellect, and also bringing in other Black and Brown practitioners across the country who would never have access to these individuals otherwise. The last thing I would say is there is truly power in numbers. So the quicker we're willing and able to let go of this crabs in a barrel mentality that we have to be one of one, the faster we will get to our goal together.
Thank you, Najaah. Do you want to take Rose's question as well there? She wanted to say, how can we bring a spotlight to trauma-informed finance, and how can we take even a small fraction of what's going to Ukraine and other places into this important work.
Ooh, thank you for bringing up, sorry, Rose, I can't see your message, but thank you for bringing that to head. So I will start backwards. Yes to the international piece. I also want to be very mindful and wary. My degrees in rhetoric. So when we're talking about racism in America, it's colonialism everywhere else. So before I take this framework to other places, I want to make sure that it truly speaks to the language, cultural, all that, that it makes sense, because I'm not here to create additional harm. So I definitely am looking into creating another framework that's applicable for international places. In regards to how to spotlight and get involved, I've been on this quote unquote ICC roadshow for the past 5 to 6 months, where I've been going to various cities and states across the country, speaking about the ICC, trauma-informed finance, doing somatics, breath work, et cetera, in person. So if there's any conferences, that are happening or any opportunities for convenings, please invite me. I would love to attend and also bring some members along. The second piece to that is we will be having an official rollout. So I want to make sure that you all are invited when that does happen, because we are truly looking to build this, as I said, step 4 as a revolution, because that's what's necessary. If DEI can take on, why can't TIF? So thank you for those questions.
Thank you very much, Najaah. And before you sign off, I also wanted to highlight that I'm really proud to be an ICC member, and I've really loved the community. It's so inspiring to see all the amazing work that's being done by all the members. You did mention the fundraising for a 5 million fund and a 15 million fund. I just wanted to see if Erika wanted to talk a little bit about the support that this partnership could bring about to making some of that happen.
Absolutely. So
Laina or Erika, sorry, but Najaah, I know you might have to drop off, and
yes, she has to make
happens
exactly
while Erika is talking. I just want to thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to hear about your work, to hear about your passion, and I can't tell you how excited. I know you're kind of underwater, but I can't tell you how excited I am to really get this partnership off the ground. So with that, let me know if there's anything that I can do to support you, and I look forward to talking with you soon.
Thank you, Derek.
thank you, Najaah.
Yeah, feel free to drop off in the middle of the answer, but I just wanted to get a quick connection between the two of you before you drop off.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, so using RSF as a funding mechanism, the Racial Justice Collaborative, and I wanted to bring attention to the audacious goal of $1 billion. I mean, we wanted to bring the funds in so that we can deploy them. And our partnership with Najaah is definitely front and center in how we deploy those funds, how we think about how we circulate that capital. So we're all about bringing in the proper expertise, and deployment of funds will definitely land with you, Najaah.
Thank you, Najaah. Any final words before you drop off?
Just as I shared in the chat, I'm grateful to be with you all. I love working with Erika, Laina, and Derek. So this is just like, it makes my day. So to expand the community with the additional participants, thank you for joining us today. Please keep in contact, and I will see y'all soon. Bye.
Thank you, Najaah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great. So welcome for those of you who would like to stay on. I think there's still a question in the chat. I think, Derek, you were in the process of answering it. It came from Karen about the assets conversation that you have. What are the assets that are the most valuable in this work?
Yeah, as I was getting ready to answer that question, Najaah spoke on it, actually,
Okay.
As far as when we're looking at these different assets, and she mentioned that there were 5 different areas of financial kind of assets that we're looking at, which I also think includes social assets and cultural assets as well. And then as I was thinking about Rosa's question, I also think about, again, like, what is the potential cost of us not focusing on these cultural and social assets as part of the equation.
Yep. One interesting thing when you brought up about metrics is when at ASBN in San Diego, Alexis Bunton was talking about Indigenous communities' definition of success, right? And that included things like having the elderly, the wisdom keepers, healthy, alive, safety. I think Jamie Glocher always talks about that, the safety of women and girls. And then she included things like laughter in the community. So I think it's interesting to, the part that you brought up is actually an interesting and important equation to it. Any other questions in the audience or anything you would like to find out? Please populate the chat. I'm going to try, if we are wrapped up, we can always wrap up and have another conversation. But Erika and Derek, how do you feel that we can tie this conversation together? Because the idea of having this conversation was to weave the multi-stakeholder. And would you propose that people who've actually turned up, we have some ICC members and we've got some regulars from the Restorative Investing Task Force as well here. Any thoughts you want to leave us with so that we can continue this conversation again further? Derek, you want to go first? Then I'll get
Sure.
Erika.
Well, yes. I mean, I think that, so top of mind, supporting Najaah's rollout is one thing. And then supporting the work that Erika and RSF has already created to be able to deploy the capital are two kind of top of things that I would like to organize around. But also just for logistic purposes, I know Cynthia put in a question, when will the next webinar take place? And what I was thinking around that is that, and I don't know, actually, I probably should know, but there's 22 participants still on, and I would love to hear from them. Or if anybody, has a burning desire to actually speak on what you heard and any ideas on how to move forward. But I'm thinking
maybe we can ask Tulasi if people can actually get on, if they want to raise their hands. Tulasi, is that possible?
I believe I can. If people can make it known they want to speak, I think I can.
Yeah, well, yeah, no big deal. Just wondered if, if anybody.
Yeah, we have one here, Cynthia Stewart.
Oh, great.
Hi, yes, good afternoon. I'm glad I'm still here. No, I have a question. I'm in the Chicago market, and we're a small non-for-profit. We support contractors and clean energy professionals building in BIPOC communities, and we're very interested in taking the work that we've been doing in workforce development and in entrepreneurship development, and now coordinating them to do more cooperative building, and especially to build affordable, energy efficient housing in our community where they can afford to stay there, versus typically what happens, of course, community development happens in our community and pushes us out. And so that's a space that we're interested in, and I'd love to partner with anyone. So I really appreciate this webinar and getting a chance to meet you guys and talk to you guys. And I think there's just it was wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. I think, Derek, you are doing something in the Chicago area, aren't you?
Yes, we are. And yeah, that'd probably be too deep to go into, but we're actually, so I kept coming back to data and research. And so we're actually are going to be conducting some participatory action research to help us get at some new narratives. And we're going to be focusing the research on how we can unlock opportunities for accessing capital, not just focusing on the big institutions, but focusing more on local dollars as well. Combination of community investment funds, which we're working with NC3 to create that in Cincinnati. So particularly in Chicago, we have the opportunity to do some participatory action research if we could find a project that, a partner can find useful. Research that can go an inch wide and a mile deep to really help focus on individuals that are being served an opportunity to actually help drive the research. So that's kind of a interesting, kind of appreciative inquiry type focus and the data gathering that the participatory action research will provide. And so really looking at kind of what we can learn from the ground up. But the focus is, and who we've been talking with has really been around a group of folks that are looking to kind of create a manufacturing renaissance in areas of Chicago. If you want to email me, I can go into more detail on it. But
absolutely. Yeah. And I put I put my email in there, but I also just dropped my booking link and my cell phone number in there. But I'd love to have a chance to talk with you, because we're not specifically looking at manufacturing, but we are looking to do that same kind of thing with our construction and clean energy contractors.
Okay.
Thank you for sharing that information, Cynthia. And I see Dave O'Leary is also stepping up and saying that he's looking to support aspects of worker-owned cooperatives. So thanks for stepping up.
Thank you.
Norlin was
Norlene
invited to ask.
Yes. Hi, Norlene. Go for it.
I'm not sure how I'm showing up here. Okay, just my name, and that's fine. Well, first of all, just what happened in the last couple of minutes has changed my what I want to comment on. Derek, I think you and I spoke a few years ago. Your participatory action research is literally the model that we are trying to wrap into our meetup.com enabled experiments in beloved community across the country. And I just want to say at the outset, I have been sitting on intellectual property that I spent 12 years developing in the residential brokerage industry that I have been looking to have. I'm going to say majority BIPOC owned, because I'm a white man. I can't have 100%, right? If I'm going to have even a little tiny piece of what I've developed, but I literally have the blueprint to disrupt an $80 billion a year industry and drive about $4 billion to what we call transpartisan community organizers, but that's really a broad-reaching occupational category that we're literally creating to blend asset-based community development as a movement with my life work, which is to empower deliberative democracy and replace our white male plutocracy with the empowerment of the collective wisdom and compassion of we the people. So that was a mouthful, but I put my website out there, compassionatecitizens.us. If anybody uses LinkedIn, I've got an article, Toward a Politics of Love, that brings all of these silos together: the caring culture, the wiser democracy, caring economy, we call it, and the ecological frame around which we need to make sure that sustainability is part of that. So the triple bottom line economy idea, but we are looking at trying to build a truly holistic model of community. We have a tiny little flailing experiment going in West Side Chicago right now that's actually live, but it hasn't done much in the last year or so. The leadership network out there, the new mayor of Chicago, by the way, is from Austin. Many of you may know that already. So there's just an exciting opportunity. Cynthia's still on the line. I'm going to be giving you a call at the number you left there. But I am excited about everything that I heard today, and I'm willing to throw my 2 cents into that mix.
Thank you, Norman. And I'll definitely be in touch with you. I like that you brought up asset-based community development, and I'm a practitioner of ABCD, so we have a lot to talk about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, and thank everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is there anybody else? Someone's asking what's your email, Norlene, so that you can share that. Tulsi, do you see anybody else raising their hands?
Not currently, but there is a question from Karen that was added to the Q&A.
Okay, but I think we just answered that.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're good. All right. So if there are no further questions, I'd like to invite Derek and Erika. Maybe I'll give Erika the first say this time to say some concluding words, and then we can wrap up.
No, I just really thank you for the opportunity to speak here today and to work hand in hand with you on such an important mission. And again, we are speaking for RSF, just throwing all that we have as far as all of our assets, our expertise, our talents, everything to make sure that we are definitely part of the solution going forward.
Thank you. And Derek?
Yes, thank you, Erika, and thank you, Laina, for hosting. I think, for us, we're going to be reaching out to everyone who participated in the call today, and we're going to be aiming to schedule a working group meeting so we can offer the opportunity to continue this discussion in a different format that will allow participants from today to be able to speak on their work and again begin to identify assets for creating this restorative investing community. And so we'll be in touch.
Thank you. And Brett, I see you've asked a question, are there working group priorities? I'm assuming you're talking about the Restorative Investing Task Force. I think the priority we gave in the smaller group meeting is that we want to try to really move capital and also support capital innovators, which is why the partnership with ICC is very key, because the capital innovators are already there, the solutions are there. We want to elevate it. And the partnership with RSF Social Finance also gives the ability for us to think big and become a channel to bring that together. So yes, we plan to have, Derek, I think last time we spoke, we said we may do quarterly webinars, but really the focus is not webinars. The focus is actually to get the work done. So as Derek said, we'll probably do more working group style. But the idea was to relaunch our work, because since we had San Diego with a lot of excitement, we felt that it was an opportunity to kind of relaunch what we're doing, but the focus will be on trying to move capital, get work done, get action done. All right. So thank you everybody who are coming. And it's always very inspiring to know that people care about putting racial justice right and center. And also the fact that we recognize that new forms of capital are required for us to intentionally change systemic racism. So thank you very much again. And thank you, Erika and Derek, for your time too.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.